Are you aware of these? 80% of a company's output is generated by 20% of its employees. You only use 80% of your knowledge 20% of the time, while 20% of your weekly responsibilities influence 80% of your future. In other words, just 20% of your inputs result in 80% of your outcomes. The 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle, is a classic aphorism about concentration. Because so much of your production is determined by a relatively small percentage of what you achieve each day, focusing on the most productive occupations will result in higher output. The 80-20 rule, like any good origin story, has a humble beginning: pea pods and mathematics. Vilfredo Federico de Maso Pareto, an influential Italian economist, was born in Italy in 1848. Legend has it that Pareto, who was both a mathematician and a gardener, saw that 20% of the pea plants in his garden produced 80% of the peas. This was Pareto's lightbulb moment: if his pea crop had unequal distribution, might there also be unequal income distribution in the world? Okay, fine, but what does this observation truly have to do with you, and what does it have to do with doing more while working less? Okay, in this video, you'll learn what the 80-20 rule is and how important this idea can be for you when used correctly in your life, which has been shown to significantly improve productivity and a lot of people's lives. You're still perplexed? Wait. Here's an illustration to show you how the 80-20 rule can have a real impact on people's lives. There are two males present, one named Richard and the other, Tom. Richard is a hard-working guy. He's the sort that is always working, at his job, at home, and almost everywhere else. He's on the go, trying to complete tasks, trying to pay payments, rectify mistakes, and manage everything. And then there's Tom, who is the polar opposite of Richard in that he works about 5 hours a day and then spends the rest of the day doing whatever he wants, when he wants, and seems to love spending time with friends and family. Let me ask you a question now. So, who do you believe is the most efficient? If you're thinking of Richard, then Richard is the busiest guy in this circumstance, but not the most productive. Being busy does not guarantee to be productive, and here is where the 80-20 rule comes into play. I said that Tom has the ability to work for 5 hours a day and then do anything he likes. Richard, on the other hand, is a hard worker, but according to the 80-20 rule, 80% of his effort yields 20% of the outcomes, while Tom learned early on how to spend his time more effectively in jobs that require 20% of his effort and create 80% of the results. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that hard work is a bad thing. In fact, on a more personal level, you may be able to relate to the unintended 80-20 habits of the 4 J's, John, Jane, Jason, and Julia, and better understand this notion. Julia's behavior is indicative of most of us. Just wait and see for yourself. John is a banker with at least 5 beautiful suits, but he wears his black, well-tailored, single-breasted Armani with a powder blue shirt 80% of the time or more. You might want to consider how frequently you grab those 20% now. Jane, on the other hand, is a busy parent with 15 rooms in her house, but she spends nearly 80% of her time in just 3 of them: the bedroom, the family room, and the office, exactly 20%. Jason has lived in the town for years, and despite the fact that there are many miles of roads in the little town where he lives, he has only driven on 20% or less of them, making daily trips to his children's schools, the grocery store, the bank, and the gas station. You're probably wondering, what about Julia? Julia has a smartphone with 48 different mobile apps pinned to the tiles, but 80% of the time she only uses 8 of the total apps she's purchased from the store. This is the 80-20 concept, and it applies not just to business, but also to our daily lives. We live in a world where phrases like go big or go home, think big, and too big to fail are common. But what if bigger isn't always better? What if having a one-track mind isn't always a bad thing? The truth is that it isn't. And the 80-20 rule exemplifies this. Whatever you constantly think about and focus on, you will move toward, says one true proverb. No one wants to spend their life being driven in 100 directions at once, never having enough time. You don't have to if you stick to the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 principle is critical to remember, especially if you want to improve your life. It's a fantastic way for you to figure out what's important to you and where you should spend your time. It's also a great way to notice if you're wasting time on something that isn't worth it. You don't want to be a Richard who is industrious but ignores the 80-20 rule in his life. You don't need to compose mathematical equations, perform tough mathematics, or understand statistics to implement the 80-20 framework in your daily work. Remember that the 80% and 20% are only guidelines. It is a common fallacy that the numbers should always be 80-20ths. They don't have to, they are just guidelines. The idea is to discover the little things that have a big impact. Take note that this concept is not always correct. It typically refers to actions that have a disproportionate impact. There may be times when you spend a lot of time on something and get the same results as someone who only spent 20% of their time doing other things. This is why you should put this idea to the test in your own life to see where it works and where it doesn't. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more useful and fascinating topics.